So today I'm joining in from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, which is Melbourne. So I pay my respects to all the elders here, past, present, and emerging. And now with my really, really immense pleasure, I would do welcome you all to our event today with Maddie. So we're talking about building trust and engagement in virtual communities. And Sasmini, if you haven't hit the record button, this would be a really good time to start. Okay, you've already on top of that. Perfect. Cool. So I'm just going to intro you this wonderful speaker we have today, Maddie. We've met over Zoom, Google Me a couple of times. We were friends with her from the Community Collective. I know a few of you are from here today. So Maddie is a community and enablement leader at Team Gauge. She currently works with both Give Back CSR, where she serves as head of customer experiences and success. And at Team Engage, she leads community enablement strategies. She has a background in psychology and human resource management, and she brings over 7 years of experience in a tech startup industry. How amazing is that? She's worked with government, private, non-profit sectors, and drives sustainable community growth across all of them. She's an active member of the Global Shapers community, and she also mentors young change makers and promotes inclusive, impact-driven communities. And so we're really excited today to welcome her on the stage. But before we all get started, I know a few of you have been telling us where you're coming in from, so feel free to use the chat. From my side, I'm the co-founder of Nauru, so I work on a social platform helping impact-driven communities grow and collaborate. And Sasmini, who is our behind-the-scenes chat moderator, who will be chatting with you guys behind the scenes and also, pinning your questions along the way, is a chat moderator and co-director of the Digital Nomad CMX community as well, alongside me. And she's originally from Sri Lanka, but based out of Mexico at the moment. So say hi to everyone on the other side of the planet, joining in from weird time zones right now. She's a community builder at Digital Nomad Life for Slowmads. And so while you guys are getting into each other, I'm going to read through the Virtual Connect guidelines, and then we'll get started with Maddie's presentation. And so for today's session, we really want you guys to experiment with what it means to kind of build trust over this virtual environment that we've created, which is why we would love for you guys to turn on cameras, obviously, if you're able to. Maybe close any distracting apps, emails, notifications if you can, to stay connected within this 1 hour session. Use the chat sparingly to leave as many comments as you like, as many reactions. There's a Q&A tab as well in there to ask any questions. So we'll be going through that in the last 15 minutes. And if you'd like, grab yourself a snack or a drink. I am literally in my dining room. I know Maddie's in her kitchen, so we've got like that vibe going on. Bring a coffee or anything you'd like to drink, and we'll get started quite shortly. So today we're pretty much talking about building trust and engagements. We've already said that, so I'm going to pass over the mic to Maddie. If you could share your screen. That would be
Sure thing. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Michelle. Bear with me. This is the classic being online, having to share the screen and double check it. So give me 2 secs, then we will get going. All right. So yes, thanks everyone so much for jumping online. It's so nice to actually see some very familiar faces of mine. Absolute pleasure to be here with you today. I'm joining from the beautiful lands of the Kaurna people, and I would like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. I know that a few people have done so already on the call, but I do invite you all to just take a little moment to reflect on the lands that you're joining from. Share them in the chat if you like as well. I think what's really important to think about today as we are talking about trust and engagement is the fact that Indigenous people have built and sustained really strong communities on these lands for tens of thousands of years. So as we dive into this topic today, I really want to make sure that we draw on that inspiration and utilize their deep knowledge of creating lasting and meaningful relationships. Okay, let's dive in. So first things first, trust is really a word that we use a lot, and quite often we use it without always thinking about how it actually works and why it's so important in our lives. So what we're going to do is break down trust a little bit further, and then we're going to look at different ways that we can use it to help build that engagement in our virtual and online communities. So I'm going to First, just kick off with a little activity. So those of you on the call will actually be very familiar with this activity from the Community Collective. So if you've participated in that, you might know this one. But essentially what we're going to do is try and find some common ground amongst each other. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't done so already, is to turn your camera on and place your hand over the camera. So similar to what I'm doing here now, you can place your hand over the camera. And then what I'm going to do is ask a series of questions with yes or no answers. So if your answer is yes, I want you to take your hand off the camera. All right. So first question, have you ever attended a virtual event in your pajamas? Be honest. That is probably most people. Keep your hand raised if you've got your pajama shorts on right now. That would be me. Anyway, okay, hands back. All right, second question is, have you ever started speaking in a meeting online without realizing you were still on mute? Yeah, it's got to be everyone, surely. Another good one. All right, hands back. Okay. Have you ever led or actively contributed to building a virtual community? This is great. We are all in the right space here. I love it. Okay, and final question is, have you ever been part of a community that made you feel truly connected? Yes, love that. So nice to see. Thank you so much for being honest with that. And surprisingly, maybe not so surprisingly, the questions were pretty easy ones, but good to know that we are all comfortable when we're online in these types of sessions, and also that we've had some exposure and some experience in terms of leading and actively contributing to building online communities. So let's carry on today. A little bit about me before we dive in. So I'm Maddie. Lots of you are familiar on the call, but you may know me as being someone who is very, very passionate about building engaged and impact-driven communities. So as Michelle kind of alluded to, I have a really interesting background in human resource management and psychology. And so just a bit of a warning and a heads up, I really geek out when it comes to trust and ways in terms of improving organization culture, but even community culture. So something that really gets me out of bed every single morning is a drive to show up and help others unlock their potential. So I've built a lot of different communities, both virtually and hybrid, locally and globally. And along the way, I've learned some pretty interesting things about how we can help to inspire trust, to amplify voices of others, and to derive really meaningful change. So let's look at what's on the menu today. All right, first things first, we have a savory starter. So we'll be dishing out the common hurdles and setbacks that make trust building in digital communities a little bit tough to chew. I'm going to get really old and tiresome with these little menu related things. But anyway, next main course, we're going to sink our teeth into all things trust, why it's so important for building that within virtual communities. The side dish is going to be some of the key ingredients that we need. So the core pillars of trust in virtual communities. And lastly, we're going to end on a little sweet note by looking at how you can apply these pillars to your own virtual communities. So this is what is on the cards today. I want to start with this really, I suppose, interesting kind of statistic. So since the COVID-19 pandemic, the engagement that we've actually seen online has drastically surged. I don't think that that will come as a surprise to anyone, but it's just an important reminder to bear in mind that most internet users, I believe it's about 76% of internet users globally, participate in some form of an online community, whether that is on a social media platform, on community platforms like Reddit. And so just something to bear in mind is that a lot of people these days are definitely turning towards these more virtual and online ways of engaging in community. So I want to hear from you all. I'm going to give you a minute just to think about, and I know all of you have had some level of experience in terms of building or leading or participating in a virtual setting when it comes to community. So utilizing the chat, have a little think about some of the most common barriers or obstacles to building trust in community settings online? Because let's be honest, there is a lot of hurdles that we need to overcome. So when you feel comfortable and ready to do so, please utilize the chat. It might just be one word. It might be maybe just a little sentence, but one thing that has been a challenge in building trust in virtual settings. I know for me, one thing that I really struggle with personally when I'm engaging in communities online is that I have a very limited attention span. And so what that means for me is that I might be looking at something like a Slack message, for example, and then I might get a notification on my phone, and then I might see something outside the window. And so trying to keep my attention on that one thing can sometimes be a little bit difficult. So we've had Manik come through. Yes, engagement and authenticity, they are great ones, and we'll definitely be diving into that. Dana, getting engaged attendees for digital activities. So yes, people doing other tasks while joining. So true. Erin, hello. People coming to the community for different reasons. Oh, this is so interesting. And what's really interesting about that is that a lot of the time, communities do have a very sort of clear mission and reason for existing, but you're totally right. There's a lot of different reasons why people want to engage. So it's really important to better understand those rules of engagement. Less natural, Marina, yes, great one. The connection piece, it's so much easier to do in person. Completely agree with you there, Sophie. Amazing, Deborah. So yes, safety is such a huge thing and something that we definitely need to keep top of mind. Thank you, everyone. There's a couple more comments in there, which is great. So appreciate you sharing that. So what I'm going to do now is just summarize probably the top 3 things that I tend to see. And these are all fantastic and they're all very closely aligned. So it's great to hear that we are on the same page. So first things first is really that inconsistent engagement and difficulty in maintaining that strong sense of trust. So what happens in virtual communities? We often rely on regular online participation, but that level of inconsistent engagement can lead to a lot of uncertainty, which then erodes that level of trust. So when members of the community or potentially even community leaders don't actually show up on a frequent basis, what happens is people tend to feel a little bit disconnected. They might start to question the community's reliability, and that makes it really hard to build that level of trust and engagement. The second unique challenge that we see here is the lack of personal connection. So quite often members in virtual communities, you might miss out on that face-to-face interaction, which a couple of you have also mentioned here in the chat. And a real kicker on this is that when you miss out on that face-to-face interaction, you're really missing out on those opportunities to build rapport and trust. And when you don't have things like nonverbal cues, things like body language or tone of voice, it can be really hard to build those genuine relationships, which can often make it a little bit slower to build that trust and engagement. And then the final piece here is around anonymity and transparency. So what we often find is that anonymity or perceived distance in virtual spaces quite often can encourage some more superficial interactions or guarded interactions, let's say. So without that level of transparency from community leaders and community builders, and in the actions that members are taking, what happens is communities can really start to struggle with building that sense of openness, of collaboration, accountability, mutual trust, all those good things. So I think everyone has absolutely nailed it on the head there in terms of some of those unique challenges. And I suppose some of the key differences of building trust in both physical spaces compared to virtual spaces is that firstly, in those physical spaces, having that ability to build relational trust. So when we talk about trust, there's really 2 types of trust that we can form. One is transactional trust, and that's really short, sharp, gets you from A to B. And the other is a relational level of trust. And that's where you have trust that is built over time, where you get to see people on a regular basis, where you get to learn more about people and their background, and it's much harder to break. So in those virtual spaces, you can't read people in the same way, and that human connection and the energy is very hard to replicate. All right. So I want everyone just to pause and reflect. Think about the last time that you trusted someone, or maybe something new. What was it that made you trust them? I'm going to give you just a minute to have a little think about this. And if you feel sort of ready and comfortable to do so, please share any thoughts that you have in the chat. I'm also going to apologize. I am at home and my next door neighbors are doing house renos. So I have a drill going very loudly in the background. Hopefully you can't hear it on your end, but it's a little bit off-putting over here. So apologies. Okay, great. Can't hear the drill. That's good. I certainly can. All right. Okay, let's see. Yeah, take that chance. Just have a quick little pause. Quick little reflect. When was the last time that you trusted someone or something new? What made you trust them? So I'm going to give you an example. I have started going to a new cafe to get my morning coffee, and I have shared my name a couple of times and my order, and it's getting to that point now where they're really starting to get a feel for kind of who I am and what I like in terms of my coffee. And so we're building this little level of trust where I know that I can rock up. I can have that safe space to do my work at the cafe. I know that they will prepare a really delightful little coffee for me, and it will be the right one. It's great. There's some other great examples coming through here. So, yep, family and friends, people that you can relate to, stories of vulnerability. That's so important, Michelle, and definitely something that we'll touch on today is that being vulnerable, particularly as community builders and leaders. And when you do show up with that vulnerability, it does provide that safer space for people to also show up and do so. Brody, that's such an interesting one. I don't really place trust anymore. I only trust people I pay. That's a really unique and interesting perspective, but I rate it. And it's really interesting because humans by default, we're actually more inclined to trust by default until we get signals from other people that tell us or give us reasons to not trust them. So we call them trust signals. But it sounds like perhaps, you might have been burnt in the past. And so it's a little bit more difficult to place that level of trust in people. Depends on the type of trust, Deborah, absolutely. We're actually going to dive into that in a second. Yes, great, Marina. Try to trust by default. I love it. Yep, Deborah, also with you on that. Absolutely. Okay, thank you, everyone, for having a little think about that. The reason why I ask this question, and also the reason why building trust in virtual communities is so important, because there's been this really interesting shift globally at the moment, and across or within certain countries, there's a much higher level of polarization. Sorry, I get a little bit political here, but anyway, people are definitely turning more so towards trusted communities, whether that's physically or virtually. And they're turning towards those communities as trust hubs where they get their information, where they connect with other people, which is why as community builders, we have a really big responsibility here to be making sure that we're providing those safe avenues for people to connect, for people to share their ideas, and to feel safe to do so. And this was a statistic that I grabbed from the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is a huge global survey on trust. It's very fascinating. So I would encourage you to jump into that if you have interest in that space. But now we're going to jump through, I suppose, why trust is really essential for virtual communities. So first and foremost, it is literally the foundation of all relationships, both online and offline. So it's basically the backbone of active participation in virtual communities. When members trust each other in the community, they're way more likely to contribute their ideas. They're way more likely to share their knowledge. But without that level of trust, engagement tends to dwindle as members may feel a little bit more uncertain about the value or the safety of participating. Secondly, trust creates a really safe environment. So when members feel disconnected, trust can provide that sense of psychological safety. And what we often find is that members need to feel that their opinions will be respected, that their opinions will be valued, and that they won't face backlash for sharing their ideas or feedback. And that's kind of a key component around psychological safety. So when you do have that safe environment, people tend to be much more open, much more creative, and those are definitely some of the foundations for a thriving virtual community. Lastly, trust just builds a stronger sense of belonging. So it really deepens that connection between members of a community. And when this level of trust exists, those types of communities feel a lot more safe. They feel like a more welcoming space, places that you can go to for, I suppose, a little bit of refuge. And it also just helps people feel like they're part of something a lot bigger than themselves. So another sort of interesting statistic on this that I found in the Community Roundtable report was that 63% of members across community report that they feel a lot more empowered to contribute and participate actively when they trust the people in the community and the community that they belong to. Now, I think that this is quite a good positive statistic, but I think there's still a lot of work that can be done in this space. So yeah, I'm just keen to hear from you all, like how important do you believe that trust is in virtual spaces? So on that sort of scale of not important to critical, I need to apologize because we don't have emoji reactions on this session today. So there's a lot of typing in the chat and there'll be a lot of video on for a couple of things. But yeah, I'd love to hear maybe a thumbs up if you think it's critical. Maybe a average hand if you think it's important. Yep, couple. Neutral. Ooh, neutral. That's a tough one to think on the spot. I'm going to go 2 hands because one is critical and one is not important. Great. And then not important. Thumbs down. Awesome. Okay, so I think we're all pretty much on the same page here, which is fantastic. And it is important that we all sort of understand that trust is really crucial, because without it, communities tend to fail to thrive regardless of how engaged people might be. So we're going to do another little activity, and apologies, this is going to be another cameras on as a preference because actually, yes, we'll keep the cameras on if you can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to get you to thumbs up react for the company that you trust the most. Now, you're only going to react once. So if everyone's got their cameras on, let me do a quick little check. There might be a few people, and that's okay. You're more than welcome to stay cameras off for this. It's just not the same level of participation, but that's all right. Okay, so reminder, you can only react once. If you trust Facebook the most of this list, thumbs up. No one. Let me double check that. No. Okay. If you trust X the most, thumbs up. Didn't think that was going to be the case. And then if you trust Amazon the most, thumbs up. Yep, a few more thumbs up there. That's good to see. Very good to see. All right, so you get the idea of this exercise. What we're going to do now is think about who we trust the least. So we've got 3 figures on the screen here. Hopefully you're familiar with all of them. What I'm going to get you to do is a thumbs down react for the leader that you trust the least. So if you trust Mark Zuckerberg the least, react now. Few thumbs down, great. If you trust Elon Musk the least, thumbs down. Yep, a few more there. And if you trust Jeff Bezos the least, react now. Okay, no takers for Jeff Bezos. There we go. All right, so why did I make you do this exercise? To be honest, it's a little bit of fun, but it's actually a completely rubbish exercise, and this kind of alludes to something that Deborah mentioned in the chat just recently. So I did it to land a bit more of an important point, and the point is that This is often the way that we talk about trust, like I don't trust this person, or I don't trust this company, or I don't trust this tech platform. And we miss a really important point when that becomes the conversation, in that trust is highly subjective and contextual. So whenever you catch yourself saying, I don't trust this person or this organization, you have to ask yourself to do what? So I'm going to repeat that. Ask yourself, when you start saying or thinking, I don't trust this person or this organization or this tech platform, whatever it may be, or this community, ask yourself to do what? So looking at the companies that you reacted for, you might trust Facebook to find your classmates, but you might not trust them with your data. You might trust X to give you updates on what's happening around the world, but you may not trust them with how they treat their staff members. Amazon is a really interesting example, because I think the reason why most of you reacted for trusting Amazon the most is because when you order something on Amazon, you have confidence that it's going to arrive on time, right? And this is interesting, because if I asked you a different question, like, do you trust Amazon to pay their taxes? You might have given a slightly different answer. So in order to move forward with trust, we need to really unpack that in a little bit more detail. And a good place to start is with the role that trust can play in innovation, but also in how it can interact with community, because virtual communities often require members to take calculated risks without knowing other people in the community well. So here's what I mean by this. When you think about all of the different products and services in our lives, they often require trust. So in the top left-hand corner here, we're seeing, we're probably going to have to require a level of trust for the first time when we let our kids be babysat by a robot. We're going to need it for the first time when we jump into a self-driving car. We're going to need it for the first time when we take, maybe a digital pill that will tell us what's wrong with our bodies in the future, or when we start asking Alexa to make decisions for us. So all of these things individually require trust. And what's happening in those moments when you're deciding, whether you place trust in something or not, is what we call a trust leap. So whenever you're asking someone to engage in your community for the first time or contribute to your community, you're essentially asking them to take this trust leap and transition from uncertainty, so this place of unknown, into certainty and known, and a place of trust. So the first time that we do take this trust leap, I call them, it might feel a little bit weird. It might feel a little bit scary, perhaps frightening, because we don't necessarily know what that outcome will be. But the really cool thing about this is that as human beings, we're quite good at taking trust leaps, especially when we see that other people are taking those trust leaps. We're super quick to follow others. So you've probably seen that. I know one of the standard things in online communities is you might have a space, let's just say a Slack channel, where you can introduce yourself and just provide a little, summary of who you are and what you do and fun facts and all those things. At first, you might feel a little bit hesitant, especially if you're the first person on that channel. It's like, oh, what do I say? What do I write? What are other people going to think about me and what I do? And so that's a little trust leap that you have to kind of overcome in that situation. Whereas if you jump into that intro channel and there's 20 different introductions that sit there before you, you might still feel a little sense of uncertainty. But it's much easier for you to think about what you want to write and to have that courage to share more because you've seen other people do so. So with that in mind, I'd love you to think about, when was the last time that you took a trust leap? So it might be in a community, it might not be, but really just think about, when was the last time that you ventured from the unknown into the known? And again, if you feel comfortable to do so, please feel free to share that in the car. Oh, Sasmini, I just saw that you did a self-driving car situation. Crazy experience. That's probably probably an example of a little trust leap that you had to take there. One, the face-to-face meetings. Yes, absolutely. This is actually another really interesting thing that I've been reading about just in research and community spaces lately, is that because the world has shifted to a lot of online community and connection, those types of gatherings, what we're now finding is that when people are then placed into face-to-face situations, they're like, oh dear, I don't know how to interact properly here, or I need to kind of re-engineer my brain and to help it think and pick up on social cues and things like that. So that can be really scary. All right, Brad, love it. Spoke up about a topic in a weekly meeting with strangers. Great work. That can take a lot of bravery and courage to do so. Networking, yes, every single networking event. That's such a good one. Do you know, one thing that I like to do at networking events is just like find someone that isn't standing with anyone or talking to anyone and just go like straight to them and be like, hey, I need a friend, and kind of looks like you do too. So here we are. Cool. Other ones, Deborah. Yes, well done. Getting onto those online Zoom calls. Great work. Yep, Marina, that's another awesome one as well. Yeah, the communities are so important. Whoa, Brody, rejoining social media after 19 months off and becoming sober. That is huge. Congratulations on that. But also, wow, 19 months of social media. I would love to hear more about how you felt throughout that period of time. But I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think this is just a little thing to keep in mind. Like I said, when you are asking people to do things in your online or virtual communities, think about that little trust leap that they may need to take. And then what I'm going to do is basically give you a couple of tips on how you can help guide them through that trust leap. So in virtual communities, every engagement is a mini trust leap. And as a community builder or leader, it's really important that you can encourage those little trust leaps, such as prompting people to share a little idea in the chat, or like I said, having people introduce themselves, giving them really clear guides to help build that momentum. So what I love to see in online communities is when people just provide, maybe a little template or a script for, what to do when they introduce themselves, or the type of information that they can include. And I love that because it helps provide some level of safety in that people know kind of, like a bare minimum situation even. But then sometimes people like to get creative and they add in their own things and they add their own sort of flavor and element to it, which is also fantastic. So we know that trust is the fuel now for engagement, because when people trust the space and the community to do the things that they say that they're going to do, they're way more likely to participate actively and authentically. So without that foundation of trust, even the most well-designed engagement strategies fall flat. And what tends to happen is that participation becomes a little bit transactional and not as meaningful. So coming back to those two types of trust around relational trust and transactional trust, what we really want to be doing here is trying to apply things that we've learnt from building trust in hybrid spaces or face-to-face spaces, and then applying that into the virtual sense. So creating those opportunities for people to connect and for people to engage. So I'd love you all just to, again, have a little think. We're going to use this little trust barometer on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you currently trust the virtual communities that you're part of to stay actively engaged? So it might just be one community, or it might be most of them if they're similar across the board. You don't need to necessarily share the community itself, but just give me a number of 1 to 10. How much do you trust that the community remains actively engaged? 4, yep. All right, so there's a bit of work to do there. That's good. Family 10, work team 6, friends 9. Awesome, love that breakdown. 4 as well, some 8, some 2. Yep, I hear you. I feel like this is the thing as well with trust. One thing that I should caveat this with is I have a really fundamental belief that you can't actually build trust, which I know is very controversial given the topic of this session. And that's not to say that you can't build trust. But I think that as leaders, you actually have to earn and you have to maintain it. So it's not as simple as a building block where it's like, okay, if I do these 3 things, I'm going to create a safer environment and people are going to trust me. And so that's where you have to show up as a leader. You have to really earn that trust and you have to continue to maintain it. All right. So, Marina, I love it. I don't stay in the communities that I don't trust. Yes, good for you. Surround yourself with trusting, amazing communities. That's great. Thank you, Brody. Love a compliment. All right. Okay, so we're going to dive into some of the final sections of this session today. And what we're going to do is pull together a lot of the ideas. There's actually quite a few people on this call here that might spot themselves in these images. So shout out to Caitlin, to Brody, and anyone else online, maybe Marina. If you see yourself here, that's great. So what we're going to do now is jump through all of the information that we've basically run through and look at the 3 pillars of trust that we can look at for building engagement in virtual communities. So this first one is going to be around transparency and authenticity. We're then going to look at consistency and reliability. And lastly, we're going to focus and hone in on psychological safety. So first up is this transparency and authenticity. So this is great because I know a lot of you early on in this session commented on the fact that one of the biggest challenges and the biggest barriers to building that level of trust is transparency and authenticity. So it's a good thing that we're focusing on this now. So what I tend to see in virtual spaces is that people often, you don't have the ability to rely on body language. So even on this call today, it's great. I can see, maybe 8 faces here. Most of them are covered by your names because my screen has shrunk a little bit. And so it does make it a little bit difficult to be able to see, are people getting bored? Are people surprised by certain facts? Or are they learning something interesting to them? And that's what makes it really hard in those virtual settings, is when we can't rely on those social cues like body language or whatever that may be. So as a community leader, it's really important in this situation to over communicate goals, processes, updates, all those good things, and to even just make those decisions about what's happening in the community and the thought processes that are being put into changing the way that things are. Making those things visible to the community is really important. So just like a little behind the scenes moment, maybe you share a regular update with your community, maybe have some great feedback loops that are open and give people the space to be able to see what's happening and to also contribute meaningfully to that. So kind of the key takeaway here is that authenticity builds long-term trust, but only if you lead by example. And that also comes back to that other piece around vulnerability. So being open about some struggles that you might have had, mistakes, maybe progress perhaps. One thing that I will share a little example actually of how I've done this right now. I'm going to give you just an example of the Global Shapers community that I'm part of. And so I'm currently the outgoing curator. So for the previous 12 months, I was supporting our hub here in Adelaide. Now, this is a global community. We have about 11,000 global shapers, which is young activists, change makers, leaders. I know there's a couple of people here on the call today. And it's essentially a hub network. So every single hub around the world, there's about 500 hubs around the world, we all address local challenges that then contribute to more global issues. So what we're trying to do is sort of think local, act global, or think global, act local. That's the right way. Anyway, moving on. So the problem that we were finding in the Global Shapers community when I was taking over the reins as the leader of the Adelaide hub was that we had introduced Slack as our community platform. It had really high engagement to begin with, and then that started to drop off. What we were finding is that there were way too many private chats happening, and chats other people couldn't access information, even when it came to things like projects. So what I did in this situation was propose a few different options for what we could do going forward. One of those options was to switch to WhatsApp. So I know there's so many people on this call here that probably have a million different WhatsApp channels, especially if you're part of different global networks. But what I proposed was a switch to WhatsApp. We ran a 3-month pilot. We set some really strong ground rules. So those rules, and it was really interesting, it did work quite well in the end, was that there's no such thing as a closed channel in our WhatsApp community. So every single comment, every single conversation, every single project is visible for anyone to be able to see within our hub. And that's really important because even though someone might not be working on one particular project, they may like to stay up to date on what's happening there, or they may just have a connection or something that project team could utilize to help it move forward. And what I suppose happened off the back of this was we had a really strong increase in the engagement across our community. And what we also noticed as a result of that was that more people were starting to share more ideas and to contribute their feedback. So we opened up that safe space for people to be able to share, to be able to provide feedback on the transition, to be able to share things like, oh, I miss, we used to have a wins channel in Slack. Can we bring it back? It's like, yeah, great. Let's introduce a wins and hype channel. And that took off. So that's just a little example of where we had some low engagement. We took time out to review where things were, to seek feedback from our community, and then to put a new solution in place. Now, the second pillar here is around consistency and reliability. Now, my one piece of advice for anyone who asks me how to get more engaged in community building and how to become or increase your presence, whether that's online or in person, is to really simply show up. Show up to the meetings, show up to the conversation, show up to the events, wherever they may be. Is the fastest way to build trust and to show people that you do genuinely care and that you want to participate. So if you don't have these types of opportunities to show up on a regular basis, maybe think about how you can start to establish some more regular communication schedules, making sure that you're delivering on promises, setting really clear expectations, and really think about how even just the smallest, most consistent actions can build that solid foundation of trust over time. So a little example, again, some familiar faces. This is an example of just something that I absolutely love about the Community Collective, which is a global, that's a new word, growing global. I literally have a list in my phone of all of the new words that I've created by fusing 2 words together. Global is a good one. So Growing Global is a growing global network of community professionals. So based here mainly in Australia, but there's so many fantastic CCNs that roam the world. And one thing that I've noticed is that a great way in which the Community Collective really drives that deep level of trust within their community is that Paz and the team, they provide a really strong foundation for communication. And so they provide regular updates every single week on the activities within the community, decision-making processes, upcoming opportunities, all of those good things. And these updates are shared in a really consistent way through certain Slack channels. This really helps to ensure that every member within that community is well informed and also well engaged. Another piece to this is that there's a weekly schedule of engagement activities, whether it might be just online virtual meetups, community events, discussion forums, all those good things. And members are encouraged to actively participate. So that makes the community engagement aspect a lot more predictable and really dependable, and a dependable part of the CC's kind of rhythms and rituals. And then the last thing that I really love about the Community Collective is the feedback loops that they have established. So a lot of people on the call here will know that feedback is a gift, and after every single session online, there is always the opportunity to share thoughts and suggestions. And as I suppose in return for that, everyone who does share that feedback is provided with some form of a little gift, whether it is a downloadable resource, whether it is a book. There's lots of awesome things that I've seen there. And so this feedback is quite often reviewed on a fairly regular basis and then shared transparently back with the community members when it influences other aspects of the community. So massive shout out to the Community Collective. If you're on this call and you haven't participated in this, then I would 100% recommend you to do so. All right, and the final pillar here is all around psychological safety. This really is my bread and butter. It is the thing I love the most in terms of building within organizations. And it's really making sure that community members feel safe to share their ideas, their concerns, to maybe even just share some mistakes without fear of that judgment or ridicule. But in order to achieve that level of psychological safety, really need to create and set out some explicit norms around acceptable behavior in the discussions. And again, come back to that piece of just modeling vulnerability as a leader. The final thing that I'll say on this is that I think it's really important to encourage equity of voice, and that's making sure that everyone has an opportunity to contribute, not just the most vocal members of your community. So have a little think about, do you have a accurate sort of reflection of everyone across the community here, or are you hearing things from the same people over and over again? Because if you are, it might be a good opportunity to introduce some new mechanisms or new ways of sharing conversations, feedback, whatever it may be, just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable to do so. Okay, so the final little case study here is around TeamGauge. So I know, again, there's a couple of people on the call that will be familiar with TeamGauge, but others that don't. It is a feedback tool that really helps organizations to build cultures of continuous improvement and drive that feedback culture. So we have about 8,000 teams globally at the moment. And as community and enablement lead at TeamGauge, what I was finding was that there was no way or space for our community champions or for leaders of the platform to be able to connect and to share their ideas, any challenges that they were having, potentially even those, I suppose. Oh, sorry, Michelle, I've just seen you've got your hand up. Is that a time warning? Yep. Great. I think that I've got one more slide after this and then we're done. This was a challenge that I definitely saw. And so we created and set up a Microsoft Teams space for community support. And this was really interesting and useful because most of our members across TeamGauge utilize Microsoft Teams. So it was in a space that they were already familiar and comfortable with. And what we had to do to help build that psychological safety was to create connection across the community, to ensure that there were icebreakers on a regular basis, to ensure that there were updates on a regular basis, and again, establishing those norms for respectful communication. Okay, last slide. So this is your little call of action today. And it's really, I would love to just challenge you all to identify, what's one trust building action that you can take, that you can implement into your virtual community starting tomorrow. So what I'll do, again, coming back to feedback as a gift at the end of this session, we'll definitely ask you if you've got things that you love, things that you didn't quite understand. I'm all about feedback. I want to hear it. I want to be able to, tell you how I plan to improve. But I will share a resource with you if you're able to share that feedback that gives you a bit more of a deeper dive into some of these steps here that you can take as a community leader or builder to help build that trust and engagement in a virtual situation. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of these now because I think we've touched on them all enough, but I will just do a quick little recap. These are probably the three things to leave with today. First is that trust is the foundation of virtual communities. I don't think I can stress that enough. Building trust in virtual spaces really requires intentional strategies like transparency, and creating that psychological safety. Intentional action drives trust. So unlike physical spaces, trust in virtual communities doesn't quite develop naturally. I think we've unpacked that a lot today. So you really have to take those clear, consistent actions to maintain that level of transparency and establish those regular communication methods. And then finally is really around utilizing technology as a tool for trust. So things like shared documents, regular updates, feedback loops, using different tech platforms or tools to really enhance that level of transparency and connection. And really knowing how to use them is key to creating a trustworthy and engaged community. So this is my final thought that I will leave you with, and it's that trust is the foundation of every thriving community, and without it, engagement is simply an illusion. So what I mean by this is that any thriving community, whether physical or virtual, trust really serves as that bedrock on which all relationships and interactions are built. So when that level of trust exists, members feel really safe to participate, to contribute, and to collaborate genuinely. And without that level of trust, engagement in the community might appear maybe a little bit active on the surface, but it might be superficial or forced. So people might just participate out of obligation or habit, as opposed to real connection or belief in the community's values and goals. So that is it for today. I would love to hear what questions you have, what you don't understand, anything that I can support you with. There might already be some questions in the Q&A.
Yes, I was just going to say, Maddie, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. The slides looked so good. I know Birdie was, mentioning that, but I'm like, yes, A plus. This is like, yeah, not much slides I've seen. Love the questions as well, but let's get into the Q&A real quick. So we've got a couple of questions. Erin says mic drop, so we're all watching you drop the mic. Asked a question which had 2 likes on it, so I'm guessing people want to know, what if you have a group of people who trust each other, but then someone that they collectively don't trust? So it's kind of like one person out of the group that hasn't earned the trust of everyone else. How would you moderate or manage or help that situation?
Yeah. To be honest, I think in that situation, it might be worth trying to better understand what is contributing to those feelings of distrust, both, I suppose, probably on both ends. And for me, like personally, I would tackle that more in a one-on-one situation as in comparison to a group situation, because at the end of the day, we don't want, anyone really feeling uncomfortable in that environment. So yeah, if you can, having those conversations in a one-on-one environment to better understand the challenge and the situation that you're facing, and then working with everyone on the team as well. So really understanding like what is the best logical next step that we can take here to improve the level of trust that we have together as a team, and come together to do that and have that conversation, because I think it can be a really meaningful way to engage everyone, and to make everyone kind of hold everyone accountable to creating an environment that is high trust.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you brought in your HR, experience to be like, take them to the corner and then bring everyone in, give them a hug. Yeah. That was so good. And sometimes, we might need to look at these situations just as like how we're building trust in a team, because the community is something similar to that. I don't know if do we have time for one more question, Sasmini? I might just ask one more question in chat. No, there's 3 minutes left. We'll wrap things up pretty quickly, but one quick question. What's your advice on facilitating discussions to keep things on track? And if there's, maybe I'll merge the next question as well, if there's any virtual platforms to do that.
Yeah, awesome. My advice on facilitating discussion to keep things on track, this is a really good one. I'll give you an example of what I do in physical spaces, and then maybe we can have a think about how we could apply something similar to virtual spaces. So in a physical setting, if I am sitting in a room with a bunch of people and we are facilitating a conversation and things get off track, what I have is a toy Elmo, the literal Elmo toy that sits on the desk. And basically anyone in the room can pick up that Elmo at any point in time, put it back in the middle of the table and say, enough, let's move on. So if you didn't quite catch that, enough, let's move on stands for Elmo, which is why we have the physical Elmo. So I love using that as a way to help keep things on track, because it's a really safe way for anyone to be able to pick it up and to address, the fact that things have maybe gotten a little bit off track. But yeah, I'm really interested, Brad, actually, to think a little deeper on that in terms of facilitating things online. I think at some point, building out skills as a facilitator means that you just become a little bit better at navigating those conversations, at politely jumping in to help keep things on track as well. But yeah, let me think on that one a little bit more. It's a great question. I love it.
Amazing. That was, yeah, bringing the facilitation in person, and maybe there's a virtual thing that we can do to help elevate that as well. That's amazing. So we might wrap things up. Thank you for the session, Natty. Everything was so just I'm lost for words because there was so much. I was writing a lot of notes on the side, so I'm sure Sasmini will also be sending out all of the notes from today's session, as well as there will be a recording online in a few days after the session has completed. And Maddie, I know you have a feedback form as well as a gift for anyone who submits the feedback. So thank you so much. We'll be sending out that link. Sasmini, I'm not sure. We'll be sending out that link in the email, I'm guessing. So everyone who attended this event will get an email.
Awesome. That sounds good. Are we okay to do a quick group photo? I would love to.
Yeah.
For the memes.
Of course. Yeah.
Maybe a little T for trust.
I love it. Do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can?
Great idea.
Lovely people. Okay, perfect. Got a few people left.
Woo!
Okay, I'm taking. Yeah, I'm taking. Yeah. Give me a second.
So
I can't do the same thing and so yeah, just one more time, guys. I'll just smile. Yes, thank you.
So good. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for jumping online. It's so lovely to see you all. Yes. I'm always here and happy to talk and to help in any way I can. So please do feel free to reach out. I know that QR code wasn't working on that screen. I don't know why, but anyway, if you want to connect, please do.
Oh, one more thing. We have a WhatsApp community. So speaking about trust and platforms, we're trying out WhatsApp. So everyone who attended the event and a couple of other people who want to join the CMX Digital Nomad community WhatsApp group, there's an application for it. So a quick application, put in your name and a few details. So we just, don't want the bots joining. And then we'll get all of you guys to also be in a chat to meet the speaker. So any other questions following up from this session, you can chat with Maddie all about it. And we'll open up that group chat for about a week until we get the next speaker on board for next month. So that's our new thing that we're trying on for that virtual engagement. So hope you guys can participate and look out for the link in your emails for both the WhatsApp community. Sasmini has just sent the link in the chat. So you can click on that, apply when you have time. And that's it from today. So thank you everyone for joining. And we'll see you guys next month.
Amazing. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.